Alright, now that I got the platinum for Metaphor ReFantazio, I think my thoughts on the game will have some weight. The game is pretty much Persona 6, but with a different name. My initial playthrough took about 65 hours, but don't worry, this is a spoiler-free review that will talk about the good and the bad. Let's begin with the good. Since this is basically a Persona game, a lot of what I'll mention will be compared to its predecessors. A big change is the cast and setting. We are no longer in high school. Your party members are no longer just teenagers who don't act their age anymore. We got a wide age range this time, and it's nice hearing some sound advice from others who have experienced hardship. And since we are in a fantasy setting, we are not locked to 7 days in a week. The condensed calendar in Metaphor might have you thinking that it'll be tight to max out every bond and stat, but there's actually plenty of room for error. I was able to max out all my bonds and virtues and still have 2 weeks left before the final deadline. And your confidants or bonds in this game are much better to level. If you start an event with them, you are guaranteed a rank up. No more bringing the correct arcana or choosing the correct answers, those requirements are gone. Now you can pick any answer you want and still get the rank up. Want to see the response to the joke answer? Then pick that. The only difference in rewards are some mag, which you can just get back in one battle. So there's no need to follow a day-by-day guide to max everything out in one playthrough. This fantasy setting is a nice change too. There are gorgeous sceneries at times, and of course, we got different tribes and plenty of racism and classism that you see in every nation. And the game is not shy about this. You see this in the very first cutscene. And the funny thing, there's this fantasy book that our protagonist carries around.
All people accept each other, and no soul is born into discrimination.
And this book is about a utopia world with no discrimination. Now that's a real fantasy. And speaking of our playable character, well, he speaks. No more silent protagonist this time around.
Yeah, I'm awake.
Sure, he doesn't have that many lines, but it's nice to hear your responses for a change. The story does not take forever to start. Unlike most JRPGs, Metaphor lets you know who the bad guys are within the first hour. You get a nice imagery of the main bad guy and some shadowy silhouettes behind him, so it's a nice little teaser from the start. Even the first cutscene shows Luis, our main villain, murdering the king in his bed. And oh boy, do they know how to sell Luis. You hate him for what he does, but he sure is charismatic and justified in what he's doing. It really reminds me of another majestic being with gorgeous locks, aiming to be the king of the world. And then there's the music. The background you're hearing this whole time is the Academia theme, which is pretty much the Velvet Room for Metaphor. And oh my god, the first time I heard the battle theme, I was blown away. Just listen to this Esperanto monk chanting and tell me it doesn't get you pumped up. And that's just the regular battle theme, it's not even the song for the final boss or anything. Now let me talk a little about the gameplay improvements. Instead of leveling or fusing personas, we got a job system that lets us change archetypes. After unlocking an archetype, you can freely change back and forth, and any skills you learn from a class can be inherited to another class, up to 4 different skills. This leads to a huge variety of builds that can let you become a hyper-focused DPS, or have a wide range of elemental attacks to cover just about any weakness. Landing a weakness or crit is still just as important for battle. We are maintaining the press turn system, where you get an extra turn when exploiting the enemy weakness. The same feast or famine from the SMT franchise is still present. But the combat is more forgiving. If a battle is not going well, you can restart it with a click of a button. You can kinda abuse this by testing out all the different elements on an enemy to find the weakness, then restart with that new knowledge. Thanks to the flexibility of the inheritance skill, by the end of the game, my team was so overpowered, I was able to repel most attacks and counter back with weakness or almighty damage. Even the super boss in New Game Plus was not really a challenge. Now on to the bad. There's not much, so some of this might seem a little nitpicky, because they are. One problem for me was some of the loading screens were full-on white screens. It's like getting flashbanged when I fast travel from town to town. Another negative point is common in most games with a large cast. Not every bond or character may be relatable. There might be a couple bonds you want to ignore or skip through their dialogue because it's not for you. And that's fine. No need to force yourself to enjoy hanging out with every character. Overall, this is a great entry for both fans and newcomers. Don't think the new setting or name makes this a spin-off low-budget game. No, this is a full 60+ hour Persona game with a bunch of quality of life and improvements. The story starts off a lot faster, and the cast is more focused. The main story is easy to follow, but there are plenty of surprising twists and turns along the way. So back to the question at hand. Was Metaphor ReFantazio worth the Plat? Well, my answer is yes, it is. If you plan to beat the game anyways, then you barely have to do anything different to get almost every trophy. And most of the trophies promote the player to explore more of the game, such as checking out a variety of events and talking to the various characters in the game. All of them are quite different, and most are interesting as well. Technically, you can get all but one trophy in a single playthrough. The only one you cannot get is defeating a super boss that only appears in New Game Plus. After my first playthrough, it took me about another 10 hours to reach the end of New Game Plus and get strong enough to face the super boss, but I enjoyed the game so much I was fine revisiting the story again. I was also making different dialogue choices at my second playthrough and went for a physical build instead of pure magic. Metaphor ReFantazio is a really close contender for being Game of the Year for me. Between this, FF7 Rebirth, and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, it's really hard for me to pick a favorite. All were great games in their own ways, and if you enjoy getting lost in a good RPG, then give Metaphor a try. Thanks for watching, Tiso out.
This is madness!